Good evening, everybody. Welcome in To The Point. Hope you're doing well on this Monday evening, September the 16th. The month is already half over, if you can believe it. Crazy NHL beginning in a couple weeks. The Major League Baseball season ends a week Sunday. So, home stretch. And the NFL will finish week 2 tonight with the Philadelphia Eagles playing their home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. And we'll get into that game later on in the program. A lot happened this week. Some news out of Pittsburgh and the National Hockey League as well, which is not surprising, but a little, I wouldn't call it joyous news out of Sidney Crosby. Disappointed for him. But I'll get to that take a little bit later. It's going to be an NFL heavy show. You guys know how this goes. It's Monday. We have a lot to dive into following this weekend. We're going to talk all the big games. We're going to talk about the outcomes. We're going to play a little panic meter later on in the show with a bunch of teams that are 0-2 that I did not see coming. So that's all forthcoming. We'll also got a lot of injury updates to chat about. But I got to start the show today with a mea culpa. Before the season, I did a preview podcast, and I told you all that the New Orleans Saints suck. That they were not a good team. Derek Carr was over the hill. And that I could see the Saints having one of the worst records in the NFL. After 2 games, they have the best offense in the sport, and Derek Carr has scored a touchdown on every drive that he's been on the field. 15 for 15 to start the season. They're the only team in the NFL to put up 40-plus points in back-to-back games. Nobody even got close to that in week 1. To think a team could do it 2 consecutive weeks. The Saints, looking at yesterday, nobody. One team got to 30 points other than New Orleans. Yes, and that was the Bills on Thursday. In week 1, Saints 47 points. The next closest, the Bucks with 37. Nobody's gotten to 40 this season other than the Saints, who have done it twice. Derek Carr has the best quarterback rating, best touchdown interception ratio in the NFL. Normally you go, let's start with the Dallas Cowboys. No, we're giving our due to the Saints. Alvin Kamara, 20 carries yesterday, $115. That's 6 yards a clip, if you're wondering, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Receiving the football, he had 2 catches for 65 yards and a tud. He had 4 touchdown day in Dallas against them Cowboys. Derek Carr, through 2 weeks, 30 for 39. That's 77% completion percentage. 142.4 quarterback rating, best in the league. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. And 3 carries for 14 yards with a rushing touchdown. Oh, and the Saints are 2-0, and they are first currently in the NFC South with the Bucks, who we'll get to. I don't know how the rest of the season's going to go, but this team is playing fearless. This team is playing with a chip on their shoulder. Derek Carr is not getting hit every play, which is a huge part of it. They have speed on the field. Shaheed Olave finally got the ball yesterday. Derek Carr completed 11 passes yesterday for the Saints, and they won the game by over 20 points. And the game was not a 20. It was farther away. They could have won that by 40. That's how close the game was. Saints Cowboys. They were faster. They were smarter. They out-schemed the Cowboys. Their quarterback was better. Their running backs, the Cowboys don't have any. Kamara looked like the old Alvin Kamara. Ripping through defenses, great cuts in the passing game, in the running game. The Saints are in the NFC South, which is always an interesting division because you never know if anybody's any good. They have two teams that are 2-0 in that division. They also have the Falcons, who are playing tonight, who are an underdog, and the Panthers, who are the worst team in the sport, who are 0-2. So you're looking at it going, why can't they compete in this division? Despite the fact that I said that they would stink. Eagles next week. Eagles on a short week in New Orleans. At the Falcons. Falcons didn't look real good in week 1. We'll see how they play tonight. Then at the Chiefs, tougher, but we'll get to the Chiefs in a second and why I'm worried about them. Bucks, tough game. Broncos, stink. Chargers, tough. Panthers, eyesore. Falcons, Browns, who the hell knows. Wounded Rams, Giants, Packers, Raiders. This team's not going to win a Super Bowl, but their defense I've always liked. Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, Marshawn Lattimore. They can compete in this division. And if Derek Carr has the time to play in the pocket like he has the first 2 weeks, they will be successful. And if Kamara can stay healthy and he's dangerous, they can beat some teams. We're going to talk about 0-2 teams later on and where the panic should be and if these teams are actually in trouble. Falcons could join that list tonight. But the NFC's always been the weaker of the conferences. And I think that remains the same. But New Orleans, Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, who I thought was an easy coach that was going to be fired at the end. He still could be. But through 2 weeks, they have been awesome. And I want to give them credit for that. Not to mention their passing game with the Eagles secondary that's questionable. That could be a recipe disaster for Philly in week 3. On a short week. Going to New Orleans in the Superdome. To the other side of it, the Dallas Cowboys. You're on the road in week 1, and you play a Cleveland team, and you destroy them. Destroy them. And people are excited. How about them Cowboys? And then you come back home, and the problem child, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, are selling their fight, and it was the best sell that they could give because the Dallas Cowboys sold nothing but shit yesterday. That was a pathetic performance, and they were never in that game. That game was over at halftime. I watched this game, one of the many, with my screens and my sickness of watching as many games as I can. It was 35-16 at the half. 5 consecutive touchdown drives for the Saints in the opening half. The only reason it was 16 is Derek Carr was intercepted. The Cowboys turned it into a touchdown. If that didn't happen, 35-10, 35-9, it's a joke. Not to mention the way the Saints scored. That defense under Mike Zimmer looked like they were missing Dan Quinn. They really looked like they were missing Dan Quinn. Carr play action on the second drive after an opening drive touchdown for the Saints. First play off of it. Play action. Raheed Shaheed is running down the field. He splits the secondary of Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, who don't know what the hell they're doing, don't know who they're covering, and he goes 70 yards to the house. One play, touchdown, great throw by Derek Carr. Great throw. But horrible coverage and should not have been a touchdown. Period. Has to be better. It wasn't touchdown. Okay. Next drive. Secondary, again, complete mess. Derek Carr, screen pass to Kamara. Micah Parsons on the opposite side of the field. He was a non-factor in yesterday's game. Kamara goes through, gets by Wilson and Hooker again, who are the last line of defense in the secondary. He goes 57 yards to the house. Touchdown. 3 touchdowns yesterday for the Saints of over 50 yards against a Cowboys defense that we hear is awesome. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and all these players. And yet every year, they throw a stinker like this in, at least one. They'll have another one this year, where they play like a team that's not even playoff ready, playoff caliber. They did this against Green Bay in the playoffs. Derek Carr looked like Jordan Love, dicing them up for fun. After week 1, winning a game on the road, that was pathetic. That's a game you have to win. That's a game you at least have to compete in, and they did neither. Dak Prescott didn't play good. Why he was out there late in the fourth quarter, beyond me. Beyond me. He was 1 touchdown, 2 picks, sacked 3 times. He fumbled. Just not a good game from Dak. Got behind, they had to force it, threw a bad interception. CeeDee Lamb had a 65-yard touchdown grab, but other than that, no real big days. Running the football, non-factor for the Cowboys in their running back room. That flat of a performance at home is hard to do. Hard to conjure up. It's one game. Yes, it's one game. But on the same token, it's one game on the other side, and New Orleans deserves the credit. And the Cowboys look like the old Cowboys under Mike McCarthy. Nothing changes. They got a really tough game coming up this weekend. That's massive for both teams. And that game's against the Ravens. We're going to talk about the Ravens in a little bit here. Huge. But if you could look at your season for the Cowboys and go, we're 2-0. We beat the Browns, who we should have beat. We did. We crushed them. And we beat the Saints, who we should. Cowboys, playoff team the last 3 years. Saints haven't made the playoffs the last 3 years. For Dallas, I picked them to miss the playoffs. I'm sticking with that prediction. They're going to come back this weekend and probably play really good football because that's what they do. They are reactionary, but they never really fix their problems. They never really give you confidence that they figured it out or that they finally are in sync with one another. I expect them to play well against the Ravens. They're at home. I don't know the line for that game yet. We'll talk about that later in the week. Probably get them at plus money at home as a road dog, which is already appetizing for me. But I don't trust them. I look at this team and I go, your defense is worse. Your coaching, to me, got worse at defensive coordinator from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer. Your running back room might be the worst in the NFL. Other than CeeDee Lamb, I don't see a receiver that scares me that can beat anybody one-on-one. And Dak will be asked to be king, and he'll be critiqued by everybody when he doesn't win the Super Bowl because he makes all that money, but it's stupid. Is he a perfect quarterback? No. But on the same token, he's a good quarterback. They didn't lose that game yesterday because of that. Did he play well? No. But that defense gave up 40 points. That defense, let's see. That defense yesterday gave up 432 total yards. That number could have been bigger too if they actually played the whole game. Crazy. 5 for 8 on third down, the New Orleans Saints. 190 rushing yards allowed. That defense. So the Cowboys remain the Cowboys. They're just another team. Ravens this coming weekend in Dallas. Tough game. Really tough game against an 0-2 team that will be desperate. But I want to give praise to the Saints and also look at Dallas and go, what are you doing? What's the game plan moving forward here? I don't get it. If they're going to win, it's because their defense, because their offense doesn't scare anybody. And yet it gave up 400 plus yards yesterday to a Saints team that had one of the worst offenses in the league last year. Not a good sign. Let's get into 0-2 teams, shall we? We're just talking about the next Dallas Cowboys opponent, the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore loses week 1 in a heartbreaker to the Chiefs. And you look at it and go, hey, on the road, at Arrowhead, defending champions, really good team, we can deal with that, It's not ideal. You want to win every game, but that's a good loss. That's Georgia losing to Alabama in Tuscaloosa in the Saban era. You can deal with that loss. You don't like it. You don't like the taste of it. But it's a loss that you can stomach. It's a loss that you can understand. Now, yesterday, Ravens at home hosting the Las Vegas Raiders, who put up 10 points in week 1, have a bad quarterback scenario, if you really look at it. One of the worst in the league. And they lost 26-23 at home as a 8.5-point home favorite. Raiders go into Maryland and beat them. Fourth quarter, 3 good drives for the Raiders. Touchdown drive, field goal by Carlson. Touchdown pass by Gardner Minshew to Devontae Adams. And with 31 seconds left, Daniel Carlson kicks ultimately the game-winning field goal. So 3 drives the Ravens defense allows. But Lamar also had an interception. He ran the ball some. They ran the ball well as a team. They had one turnover, which is an interception by Lamar. So one turnover. The Raiders, one turnover. I look at the Ravens. I'm concerned. Although the NFL is so weird because there's other 0-2 teams we're going to get into. Another one in their division. There's an 0-2 team in their division that I actually feel better about. Can the Ravens turn this around? Yes. They have the MVP. They have a great head coach in John Harbaugh. I think they have a good team overall. It was good to see Derrick Henry have a good day. But you can't lose to the Raiders. It just can't happen. Just something weird with this team. They were so close last year, and they should have beaten the Chiefs, just like the Bills should have beaten the Chiefs last year, and they didn't. But Baltimore, for whatever reason, and I equate it somewhat to a defense that isn't as good as it was, expecting Lamar to be as good as he was last year is probably a stupid recipe because he won the MVP of the league. Unless you're Michael Jordan, the all-time greats in the respective sports, it's extremely hard to win back-to-back MVPs 2 years in a row, no matter how good you are as an athlete. I mean, Jordan didn't do it every year. They give it to Barkley or they give it to other players. He probably should have, but that's irrelevant. The Ravens have so much pressure. Win the Super Bowl or bust. Ravens and Bills are very similar, where you know what it is. You know what the story is. If we don't win, our season is a complete and total failure. And you see this in other sports. Like, for instance, you look at the Maple Leafs get this labeled on them. But it's different with Baltimore because Baltimore actually wins. Baltimore actually will get farther. Getting to the first round and then having a couple fans and media people who are actually fans say that about your team, it doesn't make you a contender. Has your name written in press clippings, but it doesn't make you a contender. It makes you a social club. It makes you that people are excited. Baltimore actually has done it very consistently, a winning team for a long time. But you lose Geno Stone. It sounds like who's Geno Stone? He's a good player. Part of that defense. You lose 3 offensive linemen from last year's team. An offensive line that helped Lamar win an MVP. And by the way, Lamar got sacked twice yesterday. He got pressured a lot. He got pressured a ton in week 1. Chris Jones all over him. This team, I love Zay Flowers. I do. Andrews is good when he's healthy. Likely went back to 226 yesterday. I think they kind of have a Miami problem where they don't have a number 2, number 3 receiver. Where you're left looking around going, who am I going to throw the ball to if Zay Flowers is not open? And I think if Lamar doesn't trust you early, he's not going to give you an opportunity to make a grab, which can hurt him at times. So Ravens lose the first 2 weeks. Their next 3 games for the Ravens: at the Cowboys, home to the Bills on a Sunday night, and then at the Bengals. And they're 0-2. That's a really tough stretch. a really tough stretch. All those three, maybe not the Cowboys, but they'll be in the mix. Likely will be a playoff team. We'll talk about the Bengals. I think they're still going to be fine. Bills are 2-0. Bills have looked fantastic through 2 weeks. One of the best teams in the league, quite frankly. If the Saints didn't exist, the Bills in the NFL power rankings would be very high because they haven't really shown many weaknesses yet. They overcame a lackluster performance against the Cardinals, but you look at the Cardinals yesterday, you go, the Cardinals are pretty good, and they won that game. Who gives a shit how close it was? They won. They're 2-0. So that Ravens defense has to play better. Lamar has to make better decisions. And in the fourth quarter, it was a short drive after short drive. Raiders kept the football. They owned it. They made big plays. Credit to Gardner Minshew. He played really well in the second half. Got Davante Adams involved. Brock Bowers, rookie, out of Georgia, stud. 9 catches for 98 yards yesterday. Just behind Davante. It was those two guys. Davante, 9 catches. Brock Bowers, 9 catches. Go to. He found one of them. They caught the ball. Davante, 9 for $110, a tud. Bowers, 9 for 98. So credit to the Raiders. I still don't think they're a great team. I think they have really good pieces on offense. That's a brutal loss for the Ravens. And the Ravens season, the next 3, if they go 1-2, and they're 1-4 after 5 games, that's hard. They win their division games. Well, maybe. Steelers are 2-0. They don't do it pretty, but the Steelers win games to their credit. They got Texans on their schedule. They got the Browns twice, Eagles, Chargers, Bengals again, Buccaneers. Not easy games. Not easy opponents. They might look at the Ravens as an easier opponent right now. So, panic meter out of 10. Ravens, I'm going with a solid 8 because they have a difficult schedule. They're not playing that good of football. They're in both games. Don't care. They don't win either of them. It's always great when you have a team, any sport. It's irrelevant to sport. You can put it, hockey, you lose by a goal. NBA, you lose by 5 points every other night. They go, oh, we're so close. No, you're not. No, you're not, because you don't win. You're not close unless you get over that hump, unless you show something. The Ravens this year, to me, not close. Because you lose both games. If you won one of them, you're 1-1. You can sit with it better. Bengals. 0-2. Lose to the Chiefs yesterday at Arrowhead. And I have a couple of different thoughts on this game. Number 1. The people that believe that the Chiefs are getting calls late in games and it's helping them win because the NFL, the Taylor Swift thing, crazy to me. I've seen conspiracy theories. I've been on websites, I hate Anthony Fauci as much as the next guy, but I don't buy into this. On the 4th down play, that was pass interference. If you don't think that's pass interference, maybe we can watch a game together and I can show you a tutorial maybe or something else. But also, on the play before that, Kansas City picked up a first down and it was called back with a holding call. So, are they really getting aided? No, that's stupid. I see that all over Twitter and I see that talked about. It's ridiculous. Do I like seeing Taylor Swift on the screen every 5 seconds? I don't. But it's not her fault because she doesn't choose when they put her on the screen. And I did find it funny when Kelsey caught a pass and she was so stoked, but then it was called back with a holding penalty. I did find that funny because it kind of showed that she knows nothing. But beyond that, whatever. Taylor Swift, have your fun. And the Swifties, have your fun, I suppose, as well. So that's number one. Just stupidity. Bengals. The Bengals, there's two schools of thought. You go look at the game yesterday and you go, wow, they played really well. They made some really good plays. That defense showed up. They should have won the game. And yet they didn't. So you go, they threw a game away that they probably should have won on the road in Kansas City. And then I see people saying the Chiefs don't want to see Cincinnati later in the season. Okay, it's a tough matchup. Although Kansas City's won the last 3 matchups head to head. One of them was Burrow, but so 2-0 against Joey B, the last 2. So sure, is it a tough matchup? Is it a tougher matchup than other teams for the Kansas City Chiefs? I won't disagree with that. Do I think they'd rather play Buffalo? Yeah, I do. I think they own Buffalo. I think they know how to beat Buffalo. I think Andy Reid's a better coach than Sean McDermott, quite frankly. But I get that logic somewhat, but not really, because again, you don't win, so who cares? But I look at Cincinnati, and if I put 3.5 quarters of tape, and I go, I really like what they did yesterday, the Bengals. They played really well. Their defense made big plays. Trey Hendrickson was great. Logan Wilson, middle linebacker, was fantastic. Later in the game, they figured out how to neutralize Isaiah Pacheco and then injure him. So I can look at all of that and go, positives. Burrow played better. Their offense had more steam. Their offense had more creativity. But then, late in the game, Jamar Chase is covered really well. Defensive knockdown, and he loses it on the official. In his face, yelling, and he costs his team yardage. They get pushed back, and then they have to punt the football, and Kansas City would go on to get points on that winning drive and ultimately win the game. So I go, really good, smart decisions. Overcame a fumble by Joe Burrow, which turned into a touchdown. Overcame a missed extra point. Woof. But then it's ultimately Jamar Chase, team leader, best receiver on the team, guy who won't shut up about his contract negotiations, who loses his cool and costs his team in a pivotal moment. It's about the team. Control your emotions. He had 4 for 35. Hasn't had a great start to the season, quite frankly, Jamar Chase. Has basically said he doesn't want to sign a long-term deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. Really frustrated with the way it went. So I worry about Zach Taylor and I worry about Jamar Chase and the way this team is mentally. Because I saw positive signs yesterday that would result in future success, that would result in them playing competitive football. But then I see certain things and it just makes your head shake. You go, that's so stupid. Be smarter. You've been in these situations. Jamar Chase, you were in a goddamn Super Bowl in your sophomore year in the NFL. You can't make these dumb errors against the Kansas City Chiefs, against the Kings. So ultimately, I still like the Bengals, but I'm cautious. Next week, the Bengals host the Commanders on Monday Night Football. At home, that's a game that you should be able to compete, and then they play at Carolina the following week. That's two teams that you should beat. Two teams that should be 2 wins. Then you get the Ravens at home, at the New York Football Giants. That should be a win. At the Cleveland Browns, who knows? They have the Raiders still this year, at Dallas, at Tennessee, Broncos. I worry this team just isn't that connected. A lot of kind of disrepair, a lot of anger. Jamar Chase doesn't want to be there anymore. T. Higgins hasn't played in the first 2 weeks. He needs a new contract after this year. Letting Joe Mixon go, the running back who's there a long time. You look around. Trent Brown's been a disaster at left tackle so far. So lots to look at. For me, I'm going with a 7. 1 lower than the Ravens. I still think both these teams can make the playoffs. I predicted both of them would. I predicted that the Ravens would win their division, which I still believe they can, ultimately, which is crazy to say, but I still think they can if things go well and if they put it all together. But I'm concerned, can the Bengals still win the AFC North? Yes. Can the Bengals still make the playoffs? Tough, but yes. If they find their groove, if they put it all together. 7 out of 10, Bengals panic meter. 8 out of 10, Ravens. There's more 0-2 teams that deserve some contemplation, that deserve a look at, if you will. Let's go with Jacksonville. The Jaguars. I talked on Friday that I would not bet the Browns-Jags game because I don't trust either team, but if I had to lean either way, I wanted to pick the Browns plus the points. And the Browns won the game in Jacksonville. Deshaun was pretty solid in the first half. Second half, his usual disaster self. And yet they still won the game. Still won the game, the Cleveland Browns. Something else. To their credit, they didn't turn the ball over. Jaguars' offense has been putrid. They didn't turn the ball over, but they didn't have to because their offense is that shit. Trevor Lawrence. Let's get to this. Jaguars, for me, panic meter is a 10. It's a 10. It's 10 out of 10. And Doug Peterson is absolutely on the hot seat. That offense has been putrid. That offense has been ugly through 2 games. Trevor Lawrence has played god-awful through 2 games. 14 for 30 yesterday. 14 for 30. 47 completion percentage. It can't get much worse. It can't get much worse than that. No creativity, no Evan Ingram, and they look lost without him. Brian Thomas Jr. is electric. fast, 2 catches, but other than those plays, you don't really see him. Gabe Davis hasn't fit. Christian Kirk had 1 catch yesterday. 1 catch. He's their number 1 receiver. Interesting. Etienne averaged 4 yards a carry, which isn't great, but it's not horrible. And he only ran 13 times. That makes sense. Sure. They weren't running the football, throwing it. Threw the ball 30 times, ran the ball 21. And they're averaging over 4 yards a carry as a team. Last time I checked, 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. 12 is a first down. So that is simple math, but 12, yeah, that would be a first if you ran the ball 3 times. Trevor Lawrence got all that money. It didn't make sense to me because he hadn't earned the money. Hasn't played that well since he got to the NFL, if we're going to be honest here. And you just look up and go, why? Why is he getting that money? They were a disaster last year. It's continued on. Weird off-season decisions to sign players that really didn't have an impact, that didn't fit. Doug Peterson just isn't coaching well. He makes stupid decisions. I think he makes wrong play calls at different decisions at different times in the game. Their offensive coordinator, who's been their offensive coordinator, Press Taylor, the last year and a half, their offense is putrid. And here's credit to Steven Ruiz of The Ringer. Since Doug Peterson let go of play calling, which was after the Jags beat the Chargers in the playoffs, the next year Press Taylor became offensive coordinator, their team's never been the same. Their team has a losing record. Their team is bottom 5 in every offensive metric, and yet he wasn't fired in the offseason. Why is that? Makes no sense. The Jaguars make every other offense, minus Carolina, look pretty competent. I look at Jacksonville, and you can't beat Cleveland, and you can't beat Miami after you're up 17-3 and you had them on the ropes. You lose both of those games. That can't happen. And now they have to go play Buffalo in Buffalo next Monday. Good luck with that. That's an 0-3 start, and then they go to Houston. That's 0-4 to start the season, and that very well could be the end for Doug Peterson in Duval Nation. The cons, they got a lot of money. They love going to play in London, but they don't win anything. This team is a disaster. Letting players walk, running this offense, not making changes. No adjustments. Jags are in big, big trouble. The only reason they're not in big, big trouble is because their division sucks, quite frankly. I love Houston. I love watching Houston play. I think Houston can compete with just about anybody. And they're 2-0. Titans 0-2. Colts 0-2. Jags 0-2. Jaguars won't be talked about on other shows because it's the Jags. And they're not a sexy pick. They're not a sexy team to talk. In my meter of like looking at things and saying incompetence, and I'm ranking it, Carolina is by far number 1. And we're going to talk about Carolina till end of the show because they're fascinating. What a disaster freak show that is. But it's Carolina. Tennessee's close. Tennessee's really close for me. Tennessee fired Mike Vrabel. Think about this. Mike Vrabel, one of the best coaches in the National Football League, who got Ryan Tannehill and a bunch of stiffs to an AFC Championship game. You fire him. Sure. and the rest of the NFL was stupid enough not to hire him. I don't know if this Callahan's a good head coach. All what I do know about him is that he hates his quarterback. This isn't profanity just for profanity's sake, because I occasionally do that, trying to work on it. Lie. But there was a play yesterday where Will Levis, you could probably find this online, SportsCenter, if you haven't seen it yet. Will Levis throws this nonsensical pass into double, triple coverage. And they're finally getting some momentum. They're playing the Jets yesterday. And it just makes no sense. And it gets intercepted. And Callahan looks at his quarterback and says, "What the fuck are you doing?" Screaming at him. Will Levis, you can make a strong argument, has cost the Titans 2 games. They should have beat the Bears, who did not score an offensive touchdown, yet they did. And they probably should have beat the Jets, who looked worse than they did in week 1 yesterday, but they didn't because of Will Levis. We're not talking about the Titans. Jags, 10 out of 10. Colts. Colts 0-2. You go to Green Bay, and normally you can say, well, we went to Green Bay and we lost. And I can have sympathy, people that hate the cold, my father, myself, people that live in Miami. We can have some sympathy for you going to play in some disaster place like Green Bay and you're freezing and you're miserable and you want nothing to do with life and you go lose. I can understand that, I get it. It's September. If you're not outside enjoying it, the weather right now, I wish you're listening to this pod, but maybe you're outside listening to this pod, which would be great too. The weather's fantastic. The weather's great everywhere. Record temps. It was 29 degrees today in Fredericton, New Brunswick. I'm all about it. Keep it coming. Kill the winter. Climate change. I'm all for it. Keep it coming. Wait, what? But you go to Indy. You're Indy and you play Green Bay in September. That's a gift from the schedule gods. You're a team that plays in a dome, and you get to go play outside in September. Guess what they did yesterday? And by the way, Jordan Love is not playing either. Another gift. Jordan Love injured, not playing. You get to go up against Malik Willis, who hadn't thrown a touchdown pass, who was a disaster and every time he was on the field. And Green Bay acquired him like 2 weeks ago. He barely knows the offense. You go up there and you put up 10 points. And Malik Willis outplayed Anthony Richardson. Malik Willis, who's been a backup, a third stringer, beat Anthony Richardson, who was taken in the first round by the Colts. Anthony Richardson, 17 for 34 yesterday, 204 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. And he fumbled twice. Didn't lose any of them, but he did fumble twice. He ran 4 times for 37 yards. And they also ran the ball 12 times for 103 yards from Jonathan Taylor. Why they only ran 18 times as a team, beyond me. Colts. You lose to the Texans. Okay. At home, but you lose to the Texans and you cover the spread. And I took you covering the spread, so I probably feel better about you because I made that pick. But you're a road favorite going up to Green Bay playing Malik Willis and you lose that game? I want to like Anthony Richardson. I do. But, I mean, it's ugly. That performance. There's no consistency from him. It's get injured. It's throw for 3 touchdowns but complete 12 passes, or have 3, 4, 5 turnovers and lose a game to a team that you shouldn't lose to without their quarterback. That's his formula so far in his NFL career. Colts, I saw some people picking them for the playoffs start of the year. I was never in on that. I didn't get it. I don't think they're a great team. They aren't a great team, quite frankly. Their coaching leaves something to be desired. Their self-awareness leaves something to be desired. And 0-2, that loss can't happen. Simple as that. Rams. Rams are 0-2, and the Rams are in big trouble. Cooper Kupp is hurt. We learned that today. Out for an extended period of time, quote unquote. That's not definitive, but an extended period of time means more than 4 games, if you ask me, because that's the injured reserve. So, all right. Cooper Kupp's hurt. Extended period of time. Puka Nacua is out for the next 3 games, at the very least. They're without 3 starting offensive linemen. Matthew Stafford is banged up. That defense is struggling without Aaron Donald. Struggling. So, the Rams, I can only put them as I'm very concerned. 0-2, you lose 41-10 to the Cardinals. Cardinals have looked pretty good through 2 weeks. Kyler's looked fantastic. Rams got the 49ers coming off a loss next weekend. Oof. At the Bears. Packers. Jordan Love could be back by then. A bye week. Raiders, Vikings. They can turn it around. It's only 2 games. That's certainly true. It's only 2 games, but it is 2 games. And there's a lot of injuries on this team. And they're a young squad. Cooper Kupp can't stay healthy anymore. He's injured every year since they won the Super Bowl. Was the best receiver in the league, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field since. Puka Nacua is a stud, but he's not available. Tyler Higbee, their starting tight end, started the year on the PUP list. He's not available to them. If you look, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell are going to be getting big snaps. That's a problem. Kyron Williams had 4 catches, a running back. I don't know. I'm worried about. I got to go 9 or a 10. I'll go 9, lower than the Jags because I have more faith in the Rams because I like Stafford more than I like Trevor Lawrence. I like McVay more than I like Doug Peterson. But you can only overcome so many injuries. You can only overcome so many hardships before the levee breaks and you're just not a great team anymore. And it's got nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with your circumstance. And it's a tough one currently for the Los Angeles Rams. For 0-2 teams that deserve us talking about them, that might be it. Broncos, not really. I'm not giving much to the Broncos. They're not a good team. Bo Nix looks over his skis. 4 interceptions in 2 games. Not high completion percentage. Best when he's on the run. Low-level weapons. Defense is actually solid. But Broncos, they're not going anywhere fast. Panthers we'll get to. They're getting their own segment later on in the program. Promise you that. We talked about the AFC South, NFC, Giants. Giants should have beat the Washington Commanders yesterday, but they didn't because Malik Neighbors dropped the ball and Danny Dimes is pretty incompetent, so they didn't. But they're not good. But we knew that. That's not big news. Falcons could be 0-2, but that's it. Those are the 0-2 teams. But there's a lot of some teams. Ravens, playoff team. Bengals were not, probably should have been. Jags, no. Last year, Colts, no. Rams, yeah. So 2 playoff teams are 0-2 from last year and really looking trouble straight in the face. And the Rams especially because they just don't have the players, unfortunately. Let's get into the Tampa Bay Bucks, who went to Detroit and beat the Lions yesterday. Baker Mayfield crushes the Commanders in week 1, quarterback of the week. And then the following week goes to Detroit, plays the reigning AFC North champs, team that was in the NFC Championship game, and beats them 20-16. And I thought Baker played efficient. Thought he did what he had to do. The team played good around him. Their defense showed up. And Jared Goff did not. Jared Goff threw 2 interceptions. He threw 55 passes, career high. Detroit had the ball for the majority of the game. Time of possession, 33-53 to 26-07. They had it. But they threw a couple interceptions. They had a couple penalties that were costly. 4 penalties for 71 yards, Detroit. They had 463 total yards to 216 for the Bucks. They were 3 for 5 on 4th down, 7 for 17 on 3rd down, 26 first downs to 14, yet they still lose. Why? Costly mistakes, and the Bucks were phenomenal in the red zone. 3 times yesterday. 3 instances. I wrote this down. I watched this game from start to finish because I thought it was phenomenal. Detroit went on 3 drives that got to the red zone. Get this. On all 3 of those drives, Detroit either turned the football over on downs or got a field goal. They never got a touchdown on those drives. Tampa would bend but not break. They were ready to play. Their defense was physical. Their defense got into the face of Jared Goff. He was hit a bunch. He was uncomfortable. It was phenomenal to see. It was uncharacteristic. It was one of Jared Goff's worst games as a Detroit Lion. I'm not concerned about the Lions. I'm really not. They lost a game to a team that they almost lost to last year. The Bucs are a good team. Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback, quite frankly. Chris Godwin can still play. Mike Evans can still play. If you look at that defense, Jordan White had 8 tackles. Jamel Dean, great game. Interception by Zach McCollum by Chris Isian. They were physical. They came ready to play. Aiden Hutchinson had 5 sacks for Detroit. I'm going to repeat that. He had 5 sacks. And yet Detroit still lost at home. 9 times out of 10, they win the game of all the statistics I just read out. They win that game by 20. Because they were better. And their defense was all over it. Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, second-year phenom. 5 tackles, had an interception, a beauty interception of Baker Mayfield. Detroit will be fine. Not concerned, even a little bit. But I like the Bucs. They have that fight in them. Baker Mayfield has this team believing that they can win another NFC South title, that they can go to the playoffs and be a factor, and he's not crazy to believe that. We've just went through teams with all kinds of problems. It's hard to win. It's easy to find a way to lose games. To win one of two, you're smiling. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat Washington. You go, okay, they should beat Washington in week 1. And they did. But then week 2, you have to go play Detroit. In Detroit, and you win that game. That's one of the toughest games on your schedule, and you find a way to survive it. You find a way to win it. Credit to them. They get tougher games on their schedule down the stretch. Ravens, they have the Eagles. You got to play the Saints twice, who are now 2-0. At Kansas City later in the year. Home to the 49ers. At the Chargers, at the Cowboys. But getting this type of win can give you a division title. We'll look back on it and go, yeah, they beat Detroit in week 2. That's how they ended up with 10 wins and not 9. That's how they edged the division title ahead of New Orleans or ahead of Atlanta if they can find their game. So Jared Goff, this offense, it was a lot of weird stuff. Because St. Brown had 11 for $119, but he said he started to cramp in the fourth quarter. He got tired. He had a big day, though. Jameson Williams, 5 catches, 79 yards. He's got over 200 yards through 2 games in the season. He looks great. Jahmyr Gibbs, 13 for 84. Solid game from Montgomery, had a solid game. So their offense is coming together. Sam Laporta has been really quiet. I want to see him more involved in the passing game. But Detroit will be fine. But I want to just give credit to Tampa, to Todd Bowles, for having a game plan, putting it together, and getting a victory on the road. This can give you a division title, this type of win. Still a lot of work to be done. A tougher division than maybe with 2 teams that we didn't expect, one of them being the Saints, in particular me. But for the Bucs, they beat my Super Bowl pick yesterday in Detroit. Credit to them. Let's see. We talked about the Jets briefly. The Jets are, they beat Tennessee. They covered the number. They play Thursday night against the Patriots. I liked their game more in week 1 than I did in week 2. And they got crushed in week 1. Aaron Rodgers still finding it. Under 200 yards passing again. Tad concerning. He's throwing a lot of balls to running back. Both touchdowns were to running backs. Kind of concerning. Mike Williams, 1 catch. Allen Lazard, 2 catches for 11 yards. Other than Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, not really somebody he completely trusts. That defense was better, but Will Levis is a disaster. Fumbled and threw a pick yesterday. Tony Pollard was pretty effective. I need to continue to see them play. It's good that they got a win on the road in Tennessee. You start the season with 2 road games. You get the split. You're happy with that. New England, who's been tough through 2 games on Thursday night in the Meadowlands. We'll see. Seattle beats New England in overtime. They're now 2-0, although they're 2-0 against the Broncos and the Patriots. I don't think either team's particularly good. So Seattle, and they barely beat both of them. So they're not a 2-0 team that I'm really scared of, quite frankly. They get the Dolphins this week with no Tua. So that could be a 3-0 Seahawks team. Lions, week 4, then the Giants, 49ers. You could see a 4-2 start for Seattle quietly in the NFC West. Before we get to Carolina, a 2-0 team leading the NFC North. NFC North, toughest division in football. Is it the Lions leading that division? No. Is it the Packers leading that division? No. Is it the Bears with the number 1 overall pick? Pardon me? No. It's the Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold at quarterback. The Minnesota Vikings defeat San Francisco yesterday. At home, sure. But the defense and Sam Darnold get a win. Sacking Brock Purdy 6 times yesterday. Yes, 6 times. Forcing him a fumble, also intercepting him. That defense came to play. Jordan Mason ran for 100 yards, averaging 5 yards a clip. So that offensive line, that offense working again. Deebo Samuel had 8 for $110. George Kittle, 7 for 76 and a touchdown, but he had to leave the game with an injury. And we just learned Deebo Samuel is going to miss some time for San Francisco. So more unfortunate history. Calf strain will miss a couple weeks per head coach Kyle Shanahan. Yikes. So all I can say is Minnesota, way to go. Brian Flores, who Tua hates, and I'm sure Brian Flores didn't treat Tua well, if you're not familiar. Dan Le Batard, Stu Gatz, Chris Cody, of the Dan Le Batard show with Stu Gatz, interviewed Tua before the season, and he answered a question about Brian Flores and didn't say the nicest things about him, which he's entitled to, by the way. It's an interview. You want interesting dialogue, and he gave them something to talk. He gave everybody something to talk about. Brian Flores might not be a great head coach. He might not be everybody's cup of tea. He can run a defense. His scheme is, Brock Purdy said to him leaving the field, your scheme is fucking crazy. Sacking Purdy 6 times. Getting to him the entire day. That defense won in the game. Sam Darnold also 17 for 26, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Ran the ball 5 times for 32 yards as well. Found Justin Jefferson 4 times for 30, including a 97-yard touchdown. Sam Darnold, through 2 games, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 72% completion percentage. He's playing really good football. He's given them a chance. That's all you can ask for. No J.J. McCarthy, he tears his meniscus. They're first in the NFC North after 2 weeks. The Vikings. They're a good team. They have the best receiver in football. That helps. They got a solid defense. And they seem to believe in Sam. He's getting his first chance to really play with good players, maybe ever. Because his early days with the Jets, those teams were no good. Then he goes to Carolina, and they've been a disaster for like 6 years. He didn't get a fair shake there. So, credit to him. Credit to the Vikings. 2-0 start. Beating San Francisco. Minnesota, will they be a playoff team? I don't know. They're a 2-0 team that I still could see missing. They're hosting the Texans this coming Sunday. Then they're at the Packers. That could be without Jordan Love, which could be a benefit for them. Jets, bye week. Then they play the Lions at the Rams. They very well could be a playoff team because they look better than the Bears. Caleb Williams, through 2 games, hasn't looked very good, to be fair. They did cover the spread last night, but He got sacked 7 times, picked twice, didn't throw for 200 yards, led his team in rushing, not a stat you want to have. They just look a little disorganized. Their scheme looks dull and boring. So it's just kind of a weird thing right now for the Bears and Caleb Williams, trying to figure out what's going to work. What's the key ingredients for them to have success? Minnesota kind of knows who they are. And if they just have a point guard back there that can distribute, they should be competitive. I think Kevin O'Connell is a great head coach. Minnesota's got an awesome. I think you'd be a guy that sticks around as a head coach there for the next 5-10 years. He's a guy that is in the league a long time as a coach. If Minnesota lets him go, he gets scooped up in a minute because I think he's smart. I think his players like him, and they're always competitive regardless of the situation. He made it work with Nick Mullins. He made it work for a period of time with the Pastronaut, Joshua Dobbs. San Francisco, no McCaffrey, and it looks like no McCaffrey was put on IR. He's out for the next 4 games. I think it's going to be longer than that. Deebo Samuel out a couple weeks. Some adversity for them. Ayuk's been quiet. Offensive line struggles. I'm not concerned about them yet, but it's certainly not a cakewalk for them. Certainly a situation where they go, okay, well, we have to be aware of this. I think they should look up and go, the Cardinals are pretty damn good. Cardinals, Detroit, next weekend in Arizona. That's a good game. That's a good game. They'll be competing the rest of the year. The Cardinals. Firmly believe that. Okay. Let's wrap up with the NFL. We're going to talk about the Monday Night. Let's do the Monday Nighter, and I want to wrap with the NFL and the Panthers because the Panthers just are so interesting. So tonight we got Eagles playing the Falcons in Philadelphia, Monday Night Football. No A.J. Brown. If you don't know, A.J. Brown is out of tonight's game. Inactive. So that means Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley will be asked to do more. The Falcons lose in week 1 to the Steelers at home. Their offense looked putrid. The Eagles, as I said, their secondary can be had at times. Eagles beat Green Bay in week 1 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I look at this matchup. If Kirk Cousins can't move, if he can't do play action, the Falcons don't have a chance. Because that's just the way their offense works. That's just the way he works as a quarterback if he's going to be effective. I think he'll move more than he did in week 1, but to what extent is my question. I like the Eagles minus 5.5 tonight to win at home. Home opener, crazy environment. I think they're excited about this team after winning in week 1. Eagles, Falcons tonight, Saints on Sunday. So 2 quick games. They look up and see the Cowboys get crushed yesterday. They see the Giants who suck. They believe that they can win. They believe they're one of the best teams in football. They believe that they can win this division, which I also agree they should. So I like the Eagles 5.5. Even without A.J. Brown, I see the Eagles getting a win at home at Lincoln Financial. We'll talk about the game later in the week. To Carolina. Carolina, way back when, a couple of years ago, traded DJ Moore. Let me just get this straight first so I can get all of it. I know most of it, but I really want to get this for you and get it accurate because it's fascinating. So, here's the deal. The Panthers saw the Bears and said, we want the first pick in the draft. And they go, okay, well, we want a lot for it. And they go, okay. So the Panthers get the 2023 first round pick, number 1 overall, from the Bears. Bears get wide receiver DJ Moore, who was number 1 at the time. 2023 first round pick, number 9 overall, who became Darnell Wright, who's now playing tackle for them. 2023 second round pick, 61 overall. 2024 first rounder, number 1 overall, who became Caleb Williams. And a 2025 second round pick for Bryce Young, who in his year and 2 games is 2-16 as an NFL starter, and his complete numbers, just so we can be accurate with you all, let me look at this for you. Bryce Young. Bryce Young career is completing about 56% of his passes and has 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions for his career. That's, yeah. And has a little over 3,000 yards passing. A little over. He's small, can't see over the offensive line, doesn't have any game changers on the team. The team sucks, let's just be honest. Adam Thielen's old. Not what he's. Chuba Hubbard, he's a Canadian, but he's not a great running back, if we're honest here. Xavier Legette, who they took out of South Carolina, has 4 catches, 35 yards over the first 2 games. Miles Sanders washed. John Tavian Sanders is injured, not available. Tommy Tremble, the tight end, they went to a lot yesterday. Deontay Johnson, who they traded from the Steelers, has 5 catches, 34 yards through 2 games. Was their big addition. Defensively, they lost their best player in Derek Brown. I like Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell. They don't have any difference makers on this defense. They really don't. J.C. Horn has not been a great player at corner, been a bit of a bust. They don't have an elite player on either side of the ball. Their quarterback, number 1 overall, is a bust, and he was benched today by Dave Canales, the head coach. He was benched after 2 weeks, and in comes the former Bengals starting quarterback, the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton will start week 3 at the Raiders. And Andy Dalton does give them a better chance to win than Bryce Young. There's no denying that. Bryce Young can't play currently. He has no confidence. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's put up 13 points through 2 games. Yesterday, he went 18 for 26 for 84 yards, intercepted, sacked twice. 84 yards for the game. 1 carry for 6 yards. $13 points through 2 games. He needs to sit on the bench and watch. But the Panthers have been awful for 6-7 years. They were awful when Jerry Richardson sold the team to David Tepper, and they've been awful since David Tepper bought them. He looked at Matt Rule, who was coaching at Baylor, and went, I want a college coach. This guy can do it in the NFL. He coached for a year and a half, and he was fired, Matt Rule. Losing record, of course, no success. He's a college coach. He's gone back to Nebraska, and he's got a good team at Nebraska. He's got one of the better young quarterbacks in the nation, Dylan Raiola. Didn't work. He then goes, okay, well, who am I going to get? Who's my next coach? And you go down the list and you're thinking, who makes sense? And they land on poor Frank Reich, who coached for 14 weeks and was then fired last year. Coached 14 games, fired. He's still getting paid for 4 years to not work. Way to go, Frank Reich. And then they bring in Dave Canales, who is the offensive coordinator for Tampa. He's the new head coach. And he's benched Bryce Young for week 3. The quarterback is not the answer long term. Him going number 1 overall was a bit strange to me that it was just an obvious he's going number 1. His size, everything that went into it, looks like his confidence is completely shot to me. Carolina is going to be picking number 1 in the draft come April. And whether that's Quinn Ewers or whether that's Carson Beck at Georgia, Shedeur Sanders, whoever it might be, they're taking a quarterback in next year's draft. I'm not sure if Dave Canales is going to be the head coach working with him. It's unlikely that this team goes winless because it's really hard to do that. But can it happen? Yes, because they are awful. Just a group devoid of talent. But they do have a better chance to win with Andy Dalton, but they're a disaster organization. They make bad decision after bad decision. Could have had Caleb Williams. Yeah, Caleb Williams has not looked good through 2 games. I'm not giving up on Caleb Williams. He'll be fine. He can play. He'll figure it out. The Bears will. Give him a better offensive coordinator. I think they can figure it out. But disaster for Carolina. They are a bigger joke than any team in sports currently. Then the Sabres not making the playoffs for year after year. They are absolutely worse than them. Worse than the Detroit Pistons. The Panthers take the cake. And if you're doing anything for a survivor pool, fading the Panthers is absolutely a strategy. And it might scare you seeing the Raiders in week 3. You might go, that's a team that the Panthers can actually beat. Don't disagree. But you're also never going to pick the Raiders again. So that's a team you can take off your list and go, I'm keeping Kansas City. I'm keeping all these good teams for later on in the year. Whew. A lot of football stuff, huh? Interesting. I love it. It's the best part of the year. It is. Before we wrap up today, some NFL news. This is just recent. Detroit Red Wings have signed Lucas Raymond to an 8-year contract with an AAV of $8,075,000. 10-team no trade when eligible for the last 4 years. Flat salary throughout it. Good deal, if you ask me, for the Red Wings. Good player, one of the more important players. They had to sign him, and they still have to sign Moritz Seider, who to me is the more important of the 2 players. But both guys they need. I don't know what Steve Yzerman's doing with this team, quite frankly. I don't expect them to be very good this year, but Lucas Raymond is a good player. And ugly stuff for the team. I like Lucas Raymond. I like the contract. And the bigger news, Sidney Crosby signs a 2-year extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He'll play his career out there. 2 years, $8.7 million per. How apropos. And I mean, basically, you look at it, Sidney Crosby's going to be a Penguin lifer. In those years that he's there, I don't expect their team to be that great. I don't think they'll be a playoff team this year. They're going to be an old team playing with a lot of better teams around them. So that's tough. It's unfortunate for him, but he's made that. He's clearly comfortable with it. He'd rather stay in Pittsburgh for his whole career than go somewhere else and chase a ring. Like Brady with the Bucks, for instance, Tom Brady with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I can appreciate that, and I have admiration for him staying in Pittsburgh. Would I have preferred him to see him play with Nathan McKinnon? And for him to have a chance to win another cup, I would. But it's his life. He made his decision, and I'm happy for him. So good for Sidney Crosby. With preseason games starting this weekend, no worry in Pittsburgh. Your main man is staying home. All right. Nothing else before we wrap up, I believe. Pacheco is hurt for the Chiefs. We touched on that. Cooper Kupp banged up. We got a game tonight. We will talk baseball. These shows get away from me, and there's a lot of content before we can get to baseball. But we will talk about it. We'll be on later in the week. We'll recap tonight's game in Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial between the Falcons and the Eagles. We'll talk some baseball. Races getting interesting. The Detroit Tigers are still in the mix somehow. The Tigers only 2.5 games behind the Twins for the final wildcard spot. So interesting. So are the Mariners, mind you. So with 2 weeks left, we still have those races. Phillies first place in the National League over the Dodgers. You got Padres, Diamondbacks, Braves, Mets, all fighting for the last couple spots. So we're going to keep an eye on that. So lots happening in the world of sports. Hockey's returning. We got football. NBA will be back before we know it. College football. We got some interesting games this weekend that we'll talk about later on in the week. So we'll do that then. Thank you all for hanging out tonight. Thanks for the continued support. As always, I'm Noah Warren, and this is To The Point.